The following program is brought to you by University of Kentucky, Lexington-Fayette Urban County Government, and Spectrum.
I think when people say Black Lives Matter, for me, that's where it starts and that's where it stops. Wherever you fall underneath that, if you're Black, then I'm gonna fight for you. So Black LGBTQ, Black trans, a Black woman was assaulted, a Black anything, your life matters to me.
Here. But as we move forward, the work doesn't change. The work doesn't stop. Whether we get elected officials in that we like or elected officials in that we support, the work can't stop. You know, the work is the same, and the work is tearing down the systems of white supremacy and lifting up Black liberation.
Justice requires truth. Justice requires honesty. Justice requires discomfort. Justice requires action.
No institution moves just because they think it's a great idea. I mean, generally something has to happen that involves the pressure of direct action.
I just thank and praise the bridges who got us here, and that I want our lives, this generation, to be able to say, we advanced this far.
I just hope that people won't be frightened by the challenges that are sitting ahead of us, and that I can truly look across and name someone as an ally, a compatriot, beyond the color of their skin, and that they would be able to do the same thing for me, because I hope that this whole thing is actually about love, and it's just a really, really, really messed up, messy way to get back to that.
We are our ancestors. We would not be here if our ancestors, from the very first ones who were put on the slave ships and brought over here, did not carry a fire within that burned to be free. We wouldn't be here.
The movement for racial justice in this country reached a new peak in 2020. For activists in Kentucky, it was a time for balancing love, rage, pain, legislation, and political confrontation. Protests and direct action erupted in urban and rural areas across the state. It was a time to demand that the cities we live in and love do better at loving us back. For nearly 50 years, the MLK Holiday Committee has presented social justice advocates. They came to educate, inspire, and to reclaim the radical messages of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, I think it is symbolic, but I think symbolism is important. And in fact, I think the raising up of Dr. King every year is more than just, an activity. It's really a reminder. I think Dr. King stands as a reminder of our best selves.
He said, Dr. King tells us that one of the greatest tragedies of life is that all too often many people find themselves living amidst a period of great social change, and yet they miss it because they are asleep.
To talk about this wonderful and powerful individual by the name of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but not only one individual, but the great cadre and the cloud of witnesses who surrounded him, because it was not because he was an individual, but he comes from a community of liberators, a community of prayer warriors. Unless we understand that village and that community, one cannot fully understand who Dr. King is. One cannot understand his power. And it's very interesting that in this day and age, we have co-opted Dr. King's image. It is in words of Dr. Vincent Harding. He wrote in the book, The Inconvenient Hero, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he quotes a poet that said, "Now that he is safely dead, let us build monuments to his name."
I get really frightened when some people talk about Dr. Martin Luther King because they've reduced him to a bumper sticker. I have a dream that people will be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Yes, he did say that, but he said so very much more than that. In that very same speech, he said, "We have come to our nation's capital to cash a check." When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed unalienable rights.
You know, when people speak of Martin Luther King, I say, don't, stop, just stop. This was one of the most peaceful men that ever protested, and you killed him anyways. So don't ask me, well, what would Martin Luther King say about? Well, we might know if you didn't kill him. You know, he might just still be alive, you know, but you all killed him. So don't ask me that. Don't ask me what would Martin Luther King do. Ask yourself, what would white people do if he was still alive? Because we've watched you vilify Colin Kaepernick. We've watched you vilify LeBron James. We've watched you vilify black women that have tried to speak up for truth. This is what you do. And in Louisville, since we're in Louisville, Louisville is great at this. And they just love and revere Muhammad Ali today, right? Today. And so, but it is my job to remind Louisville that Ali said he couldn't even eat in places here because of how you all treated him. An artist, a poet, blogger, activist, yeah. And I'm a resident of Kentucky. I moved here when I was 21 or 22, but my dad is from Louisville in the Smoketown area, born and raised, and my mom moved to Louisville when she was 12.
Community organizer, grassroots activist, I've never really been big on titles. I was born and raised here in Lexington, moved away for college, that was at Western and Bowling Green, came back, started work as a nurse.
I was born in Louisville, went to school in Louisville. After graduating from University of Kentucky, worked a couple of jobs in Louisville, and in 1972, I moved back to Lexington to assume this job with University of Kentucky.
My name means justice. I'm the president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League. I'm an attorney by training, and I'm a community activist. I'm also a mother.
I am a policy strategist at the ACLU of Kentucky. We review policies at the local and state level.
My father was asked to be pastor at the 16th Street Baptist Church in downtown Birmingham. And just as a historical point, most people remember the name of that church because it was the church that was bombed in 1963 where 4 children were murdered. I got to Kentucky because of Berea College.
My name is Ja'Cory, born, raised, and still living in the west end of Louisville, originally from the Parkland neighborhood where Muhammad Ali is from, but now in the Russell community just west of downtown. I'm also known as Corey to my family, including my 13 siblings, which I am the eldest of. I'm also known as Dada to my 3-year-old Apollo. I'm known as 1200 as a performing artist, as a composer.
I came here in 1994. I transferred from Western Kentucky University, and I came here to go to school. And I moved to Lexington and never left. I'm from Paducah, Kentucky. So I've worked with women who have been abused. So I did anti-domestic violence work. I've done anti-sexual assault work. I'm currently working with defendants who are facing the death penalty.
Even when you look at some of our ancestors, you know, when you look at Harriet Tubman or Martin Luther King Jr., or you look at Ella Baker, you know, you look at all of those folks who've done all of this work, the things that they wanted, they never got to see, right? And so we're obviously in a different type of society and community, but I know this ain't what they imagine.
It's like building blocks, you know. Each generation comes in and you add to it. You do your part. It's a relay race. You start here and you get us there.
I see strength rising up. I see other women claiming their voices just like I am. I don't do it alone. You know, I'm on different threads with Black women. Social media, you know, we support each other in that way. I see women in Kentucky finding their voice. I see them, because there's no choice. Like, there's not even a choice to be scared. And I mean, from even smaller parts of the state to a Lexington and a Louisville. That takes some real courage in some of these rural areas to make yourself known.
If you look historically and presently, there are a group of people that seem to always get it right, right? Now, of course, there's a few outliers or whatever, but if you look at the total picture, there's a group of people that consistently get it right throughout history, and those are Black women. Right? So I feel confident just in my life experience and looking at the totality of the world. And I tell people all the time, when Black women rise, everybody rises.
Concern for your tears recently went on vacation. We are unbothered with your hating and your condemnation. It is simply confirmation and the very reason we're celebrating. This is the manifestation of a bloodline that birthed a nation. We offspring were the foundation of creation. When you sip from Mother Earth, you're drinking our libations. This is lyrical liberation. You want to be mad at something? Be mad at the blood on the hands of this nation. This is the reincarnation of a spirit that has no expiration. This is all Negro spiritual salvation. That down south church fan waving congregation. This is B's Black Fist that a no rock nation. But since you seem to need some clarification, this is for 40 acres and a mule reparation. For picking cotton in fields with no compensation. For not telling slaves about emancipation. For Rosa being told to get in the back of your transportation. For Sarah Bartman's humiliation at the hands of your exploitation. This is for co-opting a culture with weak imitations. For Martin and Megan's assassination. For countless years of segregation. For every time you told our sisters and brothers to assume the formation. For keeping them locked in a system chained to probation. For a racist system masquerading as fair administration. This is for Sandra Bland dead on the floor of a police station. For smallpox infestation. This is for Tuskegee experimentation. For telling us why all lives matter with no qualifications. This is for brutally raping a nation. For Eric Garner and George Floyd's suffocation. This is for Eleanor Bumper and Breonna Taylor's assassination. This is for a Black male shot dead at Fruitville Station. And this voice voice is the reincarnation of everyone you murdered with no justification. Now you bow down and simply assume the formation.
COVID hit and the city started shutting down, really the nation had started shutting down. And so we were all home. This is something that people have to keep in mind when they think about everything that's happened over the spring and the summertime. And my friend is a reporter, and he called me and said, the LMPD killed a black woman last night, and I can't get any traction around this story. Can you start sharing this story on your social media?
It's crazy because I knew that LMPD was in a situation on March 13th that someone was killed. I watched it on somebody's live, that there was police out. I didn't know it was Breonna Taylor. And I think what happened was when the media got a hold of it, they spent the story, so it was like, it sounded like that these folks were shooting back at the police.
So I started sharing the story online, and it really didn't get any traction. And then George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And I think at that point, the nation just had enough. This outcry for George Floyd turned attention to Breonna Taylor.
You know, I was heartbroken. I felt helpless, and it was a lot. You know, it was a lot, and to think that something like that happens in your own community, and how could something happen like that, and how could it have happened in March, and now in May, we're really just now getting the whole story. So I was also mad and pissed off about it. I was angry, I was sad, but I also knew at that point, like, I had to do something and get involved.
And at that point, when we started sharing the story, our first inclination was who signed the warrant, who signed this no-knock warrant. And it was a judge named Judge Mary Shaw, who in fact had been elected. So this is how important elections are, right? And so our first inclination was to go after the warrant and change this process. And my partner, Katora Heron, is a policy strategist.
I said, I'm gonna change and ban no-knock warrants. Mind you, I had no idea what the laws were around no-knock warrants. I hadn't done anything like that. And so I knew that in Texas, there was a jurisdiction down there had made some type of changes to no-knock warrants. And so basically what I did is I just started researching and finding out who was doing what. I think at the time, Oregon was the only state that had banned no-knock warrants. And myself and one of my colleagues, we drafted an ordinance to end no-knock warrants. And the goal was to draft an ordinance, get community support, and to get it out to a group of people and get people to sign on to it and present it to Metro Council. But what happened was I had found out that our Metro Council was drafting a version to end no-knock warrants. And so what we did was I literally gave them our rough draft. Like we typed it up, and only 2 people had looked at it. So it was like a super, super rough draft. And we gave them the language that we had, and they took the language that we had and created, Breonna's Law locally here in Louisville.
I worked on Breonna's Law as an advocate. I worked on Breonna's Law through lobbying our politicians, including Barbara Sexton Smith, which created a sense of discomfort because she was someone who wrote it along with Councilwoman Jessica Green, and originally said we need to ban no-knock warrants, and then recanted and said we need to just limit no-knock warrants. And I had to publicly oust her and say, no, you don't get to change your mind about Breonna's Law. You need to ban no-knock warrants. And some people said, oh, calm down, be quiet. You know, that's like uncomfortable because if you win your race, you got to deal with the I don't care about none of that. I care about the fact that we never see a Breonna Taylor again because we don't have anyone getting their door kicked in and being killed.
It's one of those situations where it's bittersweet. Like it is one part of of me wanted to celebrate that we were able to do this. We were able to ban no-knock warrants in Louisville. We actually did it in like 16 or 17 days. But the other part of me was sad that it had to be on the back of a young black woman being murdered at the hands of the system of police. And so it was the day that the ordinance passed. Miss Tamika, Breonna Taylor's mother, said that she was happy that the bill passed and that passing Breonna's law, banning no-knock warrants, would allow Breonna to do what she wanted to do, and that was to save lives. And so I can hear her mom say that. Mama, mama, can't you see? Mama, mama, can't you see what the system's done to me? What's the system's done to me?
Mama, mama, don't you cry. Today is not my day to die.
I'm not a very good singer. That was great. Yeah, but that's I really like that chant because it brings almost like that old Negro spiritual, and almost like you bring in your ancestors and you sing in, and it's soulful and the words behind it, I really enjoy that one.
We're gonna keep fighting. Mama, mama, can't you see?
Mama, mama, can't you see?
What the system done to me?
What the system done to me?
They locked us up, they put us down.
They locked us up, they put us down.
There ain't no justice in this town.
There ain't no justice in this town.
Protesters in Louisville took to the streets and vowed to maintain a presence until Breonna Taylor receives justice.
The civil unrest that we have experienced because of the death of Breonna Taylor is an example of what happens when leadership is not courageous, not respectful, and not held accountable.
The political climate shifts, waxes and wanes, and I think we're living in that period again where protest and direct action is very necessary. Peaceful protests, of course, but I think most protests that certainly that I've been involved in and that I've observed have been peaceful protests, but protests nonetheless. I mean, protest is the way that public awareness is generated.
Arrest the cop! 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 No justice! No peace!
There's a definite risk that we could get arrested because of what they put out today.
Reconsider whose side you're on. Reconsider what side of history you have chosen. Educate yourself and love those around you.
There were days when I was like, oh, I'm not gonna go out, I'm not gonna go out. And then I had to go out. Especially there were nights, I lived downtown where I could hear the helicopters. And I would say, let me go out. I just want to see. There were, in the beginning, even the first night, I was very concerned about people's safety. The very first night, the police were so aggressive.
We were there maybe like 5 seconds, and I turned to my partner and I was like, do you smell that? And I thought maybe it was just fumes from the truck, and we were getting tear gassed. And I had never been tear gassed before, so I didn't know what the smell was. And it was just all of a sudden, but the crazy part is that no one was doing anything. People were just sitting, and they literally just tear gassed the group of people that was there, so it was very chaotic. I couldn't see. My partner literally took my hand, and I was just running. And so it was very traumatic.
It was as if this city declared war on everyday citizens. And people that know me, I'm thinking, you have shot at me and with tear gas, and you have had people in my community in riot gear. And what do you think I'm going to do? You know, that I'm just asking that you treat us with justice, that you treat us fairly. And that was met with weapons of war.
Part of it is you think you can help protect. Part of it is the rage that you need to relieve too. Part of it is that the pain and the need for change, and knowing how many meetings you've sat in and how many times you've tried to negotiate peace. And so maybe you say, maybe the alternative is acceptable at some point.
We are here not for violence. We are here not to do damage. We are here for justice, right? Yes. What do we want? Justice. What do we want? Justice. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now.
The Black community in Lexington is haunted by the 1994 police killing of teenager Antonio Sullivan. Activists point out the lack of systemic change from then until now. In 2019, an LPD officer was captured on video beating a teenager. Officers in both cases were allowed to retire.
When I moved here, Tony Sullivan was actually killed. And that was the first letter to the editor that I ever wrote. And it's the same narrative that gets run now. He was killed in a closet, hands up, but somehow it got turned into, he was a violent criminal. And I just remember the way that it was written. It was as if we had no reason to be upset that this child was killed. I think that may have been my first real experience of being in a community where someone had just been slain by the police, and it was not even looked at as a tragedy, it felt, by the general population.
February 2019, beat one of our children in our community. A black bystander tried to remove Donovan Stewart's hands twice. He was in such a fit of rage, he did not stop. We have the video. Chief, you've seen the video. Linda, you've seen the video. We've been asking you for a year and 4 months, what are y'all gonna do about it? And y'all ain't done nothing. And here's the truth of it.
Amen.
Tony Sullivan happened here 20-some years ago. There is not anything that has changed.
It's time to reap what you sow. It's time to pay what you owe. You grown your wealth on backs of millions of souls. We stand strong and firm. We will not be deterred. Open your eyes. It's a new day. Haven't you heard? New justice, new peace. No justice, no sleep. We march for all people, all humanity. Bringing new dawn to a new day so we can all be free. New justice, new peace. No justice, no sleep. We march for all people, all humanity. Bring a new dawn to a new day so we can see if you had to pay for the labor, you would not have enough then to savor. Forced compliance is not a waiver. Looking up to heaven, where's the savior? From the destruction, corruption, moral bankruption. There's an eruption happening in our society. Volcanic in its power, powerful velocity. Let's heal the past, let's work together, weaving yours and mine. You wanna make it great? Let's get it right this time. New justice, new peace. New justice, new peace.
I feel deeply connected to Lexington. I've been here over 25 years. My family was formed and raised here. I am for disrupting and interrupting corrupt systems. And so I wanted to show support of those that felt voiceless and used the protest as their voice. There needs to be people that are consistently conscious of that public pressure. And there has to be those individuals that are in places and spaces that are able to impact public policy.
The first time when they came to arrest us, they didn't state why they were arresting us. They waited till I was going back to my car, knocked me down to the ground, knocked my glasses off my face, put their knee in my back, and then one of them proceeded to say, if you're not still, we'll tase you. Wasn't allowed to make a phone call, put us in solitary, and we were there till the next morning. They held us for quite some time. We did spend some time chanting, you know, to try and keep morale up, because I think there were like 20 some of us arrested that night. But the second time, it's like, oh, you're not gonna get the best of me. I know we've done nothing wrong. The first time, there's a little bit of fear, you know, because what are you charging me with? Like, how bad could this be? But it's really no different than what so many other freedom fighters have faced. Oh, if I do go to jail, it won't be forever. Take some good books and get some writing done. And I mean, do what so many of our ancestors have already done.
I also think what people need to understand and realize too is that there was a group of leaders who literally kept the city from burning down. And I think that that is very, very important to note, because there was a lot of raw emotion and anger and energy. And, you know, we see in all other cities, that's one of the first things that happens, is that places are burned down and these things happen. But there was a group of us, when we were out, we would make sure that those things weren't happening. And so I think that that's something that should be noted. And again, most of those people were Black women.
David McAtee was killed in Louisville by the Kentucky Army National Guard. He was operating his West End business when troops and LMPD entered the neighborhood to enforce a curfew.
When David McAtee was killed, I was at the Urban League that morning. I got the call that he had been killed at maybe 5 in the morning. And then I was at the League, and a reporter said, you know, his body is still there. And I said, you gotta be kidding me. There's no way. The community that loved David McAtee so much was there gathering, and it was not a good scene. People were upset, and I felt like then I cannot leave my people down here with police officers in riot gear. You know, this can't happen. And so there were a lot of people trying to keep people calm, some people trying to rile people up, and they had a right to be riled. I think the rage is righteous. It has always been. But it was a dangerous situation. And there were civilians with weapons and police on the other side with a lot of weapons. And I did not think that we would have a good outcome. I asked the police officers if they could give a sign when they were bringing the body out, because you had all of these people who loved David McAtee. And how do the police killed him, and now they have to bring him out, and we're all here. And how are we going to get through this alive? And Pat sang Amazing Grace on the bullhorn. When they gave a sign, I gave a sign, she sang. And it changed the energy. There is no place else in the world I needed to be on that day for those hours, but right there, it was scary.
Protest, direct action, that is a tool. That is a political tool that should be in an entire toolbox or a shed of other tools that you use when you're looking for change to take place. And as willing as I am to participate in that as a political tool, I have to also realize my new role will be on the end of that protest, on the end of that activation and agitation, and that is legislation, and making sure that we've been marching about it and protesting and chanting about it. Now let's be about it through written law and policy practices that are going to make permanent changes so that you don't have to protest about the same issue again in 50 years.
I am a Lexington native. The only two places I've really lived are Louisville and Lexington. I just view myself as a part of community, and with that comes a responsibility to do those things that I believe we all are purposed to do.
Reverend Williams and other ministers in Lexington hand-delivered a letter of demands to city officials.
We read the letter there. Pastor Owens from Shiloh read the letter actually that we collaborated on and created, and read it to the media. And then, we didn't drop it in the mail. We didn't email it. We walked down Main Street and we delivered it to the mayor. And it had things in it about the minority spending and the policing. So then we walked another copy of the letter over to the police chief. And we walked another copy over to the sheriff. And then we got a copy over to the Chamber of Commerce. We got a copy over to the University of Kentucky, a copy over to Fayette County Schools. That was obviously a way of us just making it very clear. And we had prayer with those individuals after we delivered that letter. A prayer that they would do the right thing.
So let's talk about how we fix this thing that is broken with policy change. And that's where it gets really uncomfortable for people. And to justice, in my opinion, we are going to have to sit still with the pain of what has been done, what we have lived through, and what we are living through, and think about how do we fix it, and then really work together to fix it. If you think about stimulus dollars being put into communities, put in where, given to who, under what circumstance, under what conditions. If you think about government, contracts being spent on who, what companies have the access to those. And if you tell me that they can't get bonded, what are we doing to fix that? What are you willing to do? What piece are you willing to say, maybe I don't need all of this? And I do think that at times there are people who believe you want me to give something up in order to whatever. I don't think it has to be that way. I think that there are people who have been convinced that the pie is limited, and I don't think it is. I think the more you engage everybody, the better the ideas become, the larger the pie, because we figure out a way to increase it. And that's how we need to be selling the American dream.
You have practices that police officers are using that they should not be using these practices. They shouldn't be practicing that way. And then what you saw people in the street demanding for justice. And so it's like, what is justice? And so for me, when I looked at the no-knock warrants, that was the first step for justice, is that we need to end this so no one else is harmed the way she was harmed. We need to end this to make sure that we're preserving human life, whether it's a police officer's human life or the person who's behind the door, their human life. We have to preserve human life. And so I think that's what happened, is that an issue happens, something bad happens, and you're like, oh, that's not right. And then you have people that are speaking out against it, whether it's protesting, whether it's people calling elected officials, or people doing letter writing or signing a petition. Then there's the action part. And then the other part is, okay, well, what is the solution? Like, how are we going to clean this up? How are we going to fix this? And so a lot of times what you do is you create legislation to end something or to change something. And that's, really what happened. And now we're seeing a whole conversation on overall police reform. And that's not really a conversation. I know that locally this ever happened to this degree, but that is now the conversation nationwide is how are we going to change policing? You saw it with George Floyd. How are we going, and now you've seen a lot of jurisdiction ban chokeholds and all of those things. And so it's almost like what's the problem that's happening? What are our values as a community? You know, and not just the values of a black community, but what's the values of the community at large? And we have to come together on those values. And so for me, it was human life.
When we first took to the streets in 2014, right, we knew that Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson in the streets and that we had Tony Sullivan here 20 years earlier die in the same manner, right? Well, and we pushed for body cams, and we want a police civilian review board, and we want all these changes. Do you realize that it was, how many years later? It was 2019 when this happened with Donovan Stewart, that I'm getting all these answers from city council, oh, it has to be changed at the state level. And you get all these answers that just push the buck down the road. But there's nothing we can do to address this. It'll take too much time. It'll take too much effort. And it required me to silence all that noise and to go look up at laws for hours, research, KRS level statutes, Kentucky level state statutes, right? Local Lexington city ordinances, but then also coming to find out this collective bargaining agreement police contract with an LPD. I had to go through for hours and research, where is it that it's written that these officers don't get held accountable? I'm figuring out that Tony Sullivan happened 20 years ago and nothing in this city has changed so that the outcome would be different. One, that it doesn't happen, or two, that he wouldn't be allowed to retire. And 20 some years later, we sit in that same situation. So, I mean, do we have time to go research while we're dying in the streets? It depends on what your MO is and what you're really trying to change. Because what I'm finding out for local changes here within the city of Lexington, to make sure that what we encounter when we encounter police and what we encounter in the criminal justice system when we encounter police and it leads to us living and having charges, required me to go research extensively what are those laws and how do they operate? What can be changed and how can they be changed? And also, who do we need to talk to about changing them?
I agreed to be on the mayor's commission, and that commission was comprised of professionals near and far, of women and men that knew the subject matter with a great deal of depth, clinical experience, lived experience. That commission was loaded with people that were able and have put together a set of over 50 recommendations that could absolutely dismantle some systems of inequity here in Lexington, Kentucky, if we so choose.
I work in the criminal justice system, and one of the things when any of the defendants that I have worked for, if they are convicted, one of the things that's required as part of their sentence is restitution. They have to make it right. And so reparations is a way that things could begin to be made right. One of the ways that we suffer as Black people is through economics and economic opportunity and all of the challenges and policies that have been written to keep us outside of it. And so, yeah, that's how we treat anything else when people have been wronged. There's an amends process. And in that, the people who have been wronged get to say how you can make it right.
And people are trying to determine what's the right amount. We are owed it all. The land, investments, free college, housing. Black people are owed it all. You know, and they don't, you know, a lot of white people just don't want to admit. Everything you have and what is built, 99.9% of the time you can trace back to a Black person that built that.
There is no liberation without reparations.
We are all trying to imagine a world or a community that no one has ever seen before. And I think that when you look at white supremacy and racial injustice, that has been, it's impacted our communities for so long that some of those injustices or ideologies are also in the black community. And so I think the first thing is that we have to heal. It's a lot of healing that has to take place.
I think black people need to be easier on themselves. I think we are very hard on each other, and we can know that everybody in our family is working hard and doing everything, but we watch the news and we get brainwashed by the negative that we see too. So the first thing we need to do is just be honest about who we are and what we know ourselves to be, regardless of the conditions, right? Let's celebrate our resilience. As it relates to the challenges in our community, I think a lot of that does really come from broken communities, broken by broken policies. So as we fix things in the communities we live in, we too will be healed.
You know, I think it's remarkable that black people continue to have babies, to get married, you know, to get up every day, you know, looking for some good music, some good food. I mean, it's like, the fact that we have retained our humanity and we're not talking about revenge, you know, that we're just talking about justice. And the fact that we, despite our issues, the fact that we still, you know, many of us still see ourselves in community and rely on those kinds of community rituals and community traditions that keep us humane.
I think that George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor together have changed the world as we know it. And I think we'll be feeling the results of those changes for a long time. It doesn't take long for people to feel race fatigue and decide that they have done enough and they're tired of hearing about it. And so I think it's for us to push, and hopefully our allies too. And I have to tell you, one thing that was very encouraging about the protest and the demonstrations, they were not just black people. They were all kinds of people. And in some cases, you had white people leading protests, saying, we have seen this and enough is enough. I have seen people use their privilege and their power to help further our cause in ways that I did not imagine. And so maybe America has hit a new point, you know, and I've always really felt like we were kind of in the battle, you know, for the soul of our country. And I thought that we were like at 49-51 with the good guys losing. And I think it's closer now. I think it's closer now. So, you know, I do feel encouraged. I do think we can change the world. But the 50% of us, or the 49.9 or whatever, we have to band together. And people cannot get exhausted, and they can't get so uncomfortable that they start lying to themselves again and lying to us.
New justice, new peace. No justice, no sleep. We march for all people, all humanity. Bringing new dawn to a new day so we can all be free. New justice, new peace. No justice, no sleep. We march for all people, all humanity. Bringing new dawn to a new day so we can live free. This is a revolution. It won't be televised. Life, liberty, and justice dying right before our eyes. This
The following program is brought to you by University of Kentucky, Lexington-Fayette Urban County Government, and Spectrum. The following program is brought to you by University of Kentucky, Lexington-Fayette Urban County Government, and Spectrum.